Welcome to the Powerful Podcast, where you will learn the marketing, strategies, and beliefs to grow your dream business. Totally possible, and I'm so excited to share this with you. I'm Alexandra and I, and I grew and scaled my own business from zero to multi-millions and sold the business. And now I'm here to teach you exactly how to grow and scale your business from 6 to 7 figures and more with ease, simplicity, joy, and fun with, of course, strategy, mindset, and marketing to take you to that next level. Well, hello. Thank you so much, and welcome back to the Powerful Podcast with me, Alexandra and I. I'm always excited about our podcast guests, but this one is also really special. And it's always special when I talk to one of my own coaches who I really, really connect with. And I know I say I connect with everybody, which is the joy that I get to have. But really, Alexandra is something special, and you are in for a real treat. So Alexandra is an e-commerce entrepreneur who, alongside her husband, Aiden, built a multi-7-figure brand on Amazon with her 3 babies on her hip. Yes. Originally from Chicago, she left her on-paper perfect corporate fashion merchandising career, where she managed multiple 8- and 9-figure product assortments for companies like Lululemon, Amazon, and Abercrombie & Fitch, and moved to Australia in 2018. Outside of e-commerce and brand building, Alexandra's calling is to inspire women everywhere to tap into their creativity, become financially literate, and create wealth. In addition to building her e-com brand, she's also mentored and coached hundreds of entrepreneurs across the globe in both business and personal development fields. Alexandra's family is her why, and these days, you'll most often catch her spending time with them around her home or in nature. She lives 5 minutes from the beach. She loves to read, write, and do yoga and Legree Pilates when she can. Alexandra eats a piece, let's be honest, is really more like 2 or 3 pieces of dark chocolate nearly every day. Of course, it's all about the chocolate. Well, thank you
Of course.
so much. Yes. And I want to set up this conversation to talk about how Alexandra and I met in another coaching program. And she was actually my coach. We had the main coach, Kate Scudder, who it was through her program that we met. But the neat thing is that we also had monthly pod calls, and Alexandra was my pod coach. And from the moment I met her, she just has this beautiful, spectacular aura, and she's calm. And actually, we didn't know this. She was pregnant at the time, and she's just, giving us all of this amazing advice and helping us through things. And she's 2 young ones at home and running her 7-figure business. And I was like, who is this woman? And she just happened to talk about, oh, I'm pregnant, I'm giving birth again soon. And I was like, what? Who is this woman? I need to know
Oh
more.
my gosh.
But especially it drew us in because you were a wealth of information. And I think you also prove that it's also about asking the right questions in terms of building your business and your wealth. And there is no cookie cutter approach. And one day we were talking about on our call was about paying ourselves in our businesses. And even that in how you pay yourself and set up your life is so different. And so how I talk about and how I teach my clients is, what are your dream? What is the dream life you want to have? And that fundamentally ladders into how you pay yourself or may not pay yourself. And we're going to dig into this. And this is where the conversation initially started. And that's where I wanted to bring Alexandra on to talk about what are your actual goals in life and business and how does that create wealth. So really over to you, Alexandra, to share all of your wise words and knowledge.
Yeah, wow. Thank you. What an incredible intro. I'm so excited to be chatting with you about this today. Do you know this is the first podcast interview I've been on in like 2 years. Yeah, I really, at the start of 2023, I was like, okay, I can feel all of my energy just wanting to go just fully focus in on only our e-commerce business. And so I stopped doing anything in the realm of like coaching, mentorship. I stopped my own podcast, and I stopped accepting invitations to go on other people's podcasts. And it's so interesting because 2023 and then 2024 have totally just been like this vortex of like focusing just on our e-commerce business. And now I'm feeling like, ooh, I'm actually ready to like dip my toes in the water, and kind of like immerse myself back in sharing what we've been learning for the last 2 years, because I honestly don't think I would have been in a place to teach or share. We've just in the last 2 years, we've had huge learnings. It's definitely been like a growth era for us. But yeah, now that we're like emerging onto the other side, there's just, oh my God, I feel like I don't even know where to start. But I remember that conversation that we had, Almira, so well. I remember it like it was yesterday when you were like, whoa, this is like the aha moment where I wish more people understood that income and wealth are not the same thing. And I think that's really the foundation for this whole conversation when you're thinking about, okay, well, what are my goals to pay myself from my business or continue to reinvest in my business? Am I building my business to be a saleable asset and like, eventually have a liquidity event where I sell it for, whatever it's worth at market value. And then that capital is my wealth nest egg salary for the year, whatever. I think, in society, we're really only fed the income approach, where it's like you become an employee, you get a job, you work, that's your income. And like kind of this whole like how to build and create wealth is not talked about at all. And then there's also zero conversation, like that's not talked about. And then there's zero conversation on, okay, well, how do I create goals in both buckets? What is the difference between income and wealth? So maybe we'll start there. Income, like for the purposes of this conversation, income is the money that you need to cover your living expenses day in and day out. Wealth is future. Wealth is assets. So the definition of assets being something that puts money into your pocket. Like the classic Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad, Poor Dad definition. And so when you start to separate, okay, what are my income generation goals? What do I need to generate in order to keep the lights on in my life versus what are my long-term wealth goals? Then the conversation starts to take on a totally different meaning. I will never forget the coaching program I used to run, Unravel, which was all about tapping into your sensuality to basically create exponential wealth. We had this conversation the first time I ever ran that program back in 2022 about what is income versus wealth, and like the light bulb moments that I saw in all of those women's eyes, like I will never forget it. Because a lot of us don't consider the difference between income and wealth. So yeah, that would be my first thing to offer would be what's the money that you need to generate to live a comfortable lifestyle? And then beyond that, what's the future? Like, what does financial freedom mean for you? And that's wealth. That's what wealth generates and builds, is that financial freedom piece. Wealth is long term. I like to think of wealth as feminine energy. It's creative. Wealth is born from creating, a product, a service, a business. Wealth is the energy to create wealth is very different from even the energy that you need to start a business or generate income, right? Like starting a business, generating income, very masculine energy. Like you've got to have structure for it to work. You've got to be consistent. You've got to move fast. You've got to respond to market demand. And then once that cash is generated, it's like, okay, well, how are we going to grow it? And that's the wealth question. There's a really incredible businesswoman, Layla Hormozi. I forget that. I think her podcast is just called Build. She is someone that created $100 million in net worth by the age of 28, and she's so inspirational to listen to. And I love how she says that energy to create wealth is the exact opposite of the energy needed to create a business. And it's so true. Wealth is long term. Wealth is breathability. Wealth is how many days forward can you survive with all of your like assets and cash flow as it stands today, right? And income is just like, okay, well, what's the money that keeps the lights on? Like your house, your food, your car, insurance, whatever. So then that's like the kind of overarching umbrella of the conversation. So how does the original question you asked of, well, what does it mean to pay myself versus not pay myself, or how much to pay myself in my business? You can't really start to ask yourself that question until you understand, okay, what's my income goal? What's my wealth goal?
And it's so true, when we start to get those questions about goals. And I know I had a financial partner that I was working with, and she says, well, what is your goal? And I'm like, well, I don't know what my goal is because I know what I want ultimately, but how to get there, it's two separate things. And then, so I was like, I need some guidance on this. What exactly are you talking about? What my goal is? And she said, if you buy a property, what is your desire? Is the desire to hold on to it so that you can sell it? And especially I'm in Vancouver and real estate is crazy. Or is it to get cash flow right away so that it can start generating the profit? And again, I didn't even have an idea of what the goal was because I didn't have the clarification of it. So when we start to dive into these questions, and especially for your business, for example, you want to do an exit, a larger exit. And so you've determined within your family about any work that you are going to do. And your husband is the main person in the business, kind of doing the nitty gritty and dirty work of that. And especially because you've got the kids as well. And so there's the partnership that you both have to be able to hold it, because that leads to the bigger long-term wealth goals that you have. And I don't think that there's enough of an understanding about that, about what does this lead to long-term. And I know, especially as entrepreneurs, we often keep our salaries or our dividends lower from what we take out of the business. Like, when you have the incorporated company, you only take out a certain amount. But I did that until I realized that I actually didn't qualify for a mortgage personally. So
Yeah.
what I was taking out of the business was in direct, almost violation of my dreams, because you're showing such a low salary that actually you're having to adjust everything, or, dipping into money or savings that you actually have in order to be able to qualify for a bank loan. So they're directly working against each other. And I think having those discussions sooner when we start the business, or starting to have the conversations as the business evolves, because then you actually have something that you're left with. Otherwise, one, you may not be left with anything, but two, you've missed a lot of opportunities as well. What could you have in terms of the long-term assets and the wealth and generating some income, or having land, or whatever it might be, whatever that long-term wealth is? That piece has actually never been factored into it. And I know so many entrepreneurs are like, well, I want to be at seven figures. But do you want to be at seven figures in the business? What do you want as your lifestyle? Do you want to have money aside to do a purchase? What about purchasing office space, or actually working with some programs? Like I know here in Canada, there's BDC, Business Development Canada, where at one point, and I don't know if it's the same anymore, but at one point they were doing 0% financing for you to get your own office space, which is something you can take advantage of. And particularly when we were looking into my business, that was 2016. Can you imagine how much business office space, or even a work live place, which we could have taken advantage of to do, somebody who was working from home, and therefore you're not worried about commercial leasing. But either way, we could have had some property within the business, and we weren't making those decisions because we didn't have the long-term eye on this. So can
Yeah.
you tell me, what was the discussion points or the turning points? Or I know you and Aiden, I mean, I love your partnership, and you guys as a couple and as entrepreneurs together, you have this beautiful partnership in there. How did those discussions start happening? And also, like, when you decided to start with ecom, was that a decision that you made because you wanted a different wealth? Like, tell us all about that.
Yeah, oh my gosh. My brain is like pinging with all the directions this conversation can go because it touches everything,
Mm.
absolutely everything. We fell into this understanding. First, I should make a disclaimer that anything that like I suggest is certainly not financial advice. It's just sharing examples of what has worked well for us and what I see kind of that's missing in the space. But yeah, so we fell into this conversation accidentally. Because no one teaches you this. You kind of got to like piece it together, right? So when we started the Amazon business, our brand back in I guess you could officially say 2019, was when we like incorporated our company. And then we didn't start selling successfully until 2020, like our first successful product. But the reason that I got the idea to build an Amazon brand to eventually sell is because that's what my mentor did.
Mm.
And so the whole reason that I chose to learn the Amazon business model under her was because she was like, hey, I built this Amazon brand and then I had a seven-figure exit. And so I was like, you know what? That's actually so smart. Like you build a brand for a few years, you have multiple seven-figure payday, and then what you can do, the options that you have when you have that like seven figures in the bank, which is very different from having a seven-figure business. Um, it's like your options just open up exponentially. And so for me, for myself and Aiden, we really quickly realized that there's two goals that we could take with this. We could build the brand to have an exit, which means everything that the brand profits goes straight back in. We reinvest it and we continue to build this thing into an engine that can have an exit in a few years' time. What does growth in a business often come at the expense of? Well, your owner's pay, your salary. And so for us, we were like, how easy is it to run this business alongside having separate income streams to take care of our lifestyle expenses? Genuinely so easy. And so you've got to ask yourself, like, with my specific business model, like, A, what are my goals? And then B, what do I have time and space for? Like, do I have time to build my business and also have a separate stream of income? Like that's something that you've got to consider too. It's a conversation that will be so specific to your business model and so specific to your lifestyle goals. And then the other thing that you can consider is like, well, is part of what I'm paying myself from my business, like, is a chunk of that salary then diverted into some type of wealth creation, right? Because as you're building wealth to maybe eventually take over and supplement your lifestyle, living income, there is the very real kind of like nitty-gritty, like unsexy process of, well, some of my like salary becomes that that capital to then go into my wealth building vehicle. A really, really good book to kind of like more firmly understand this concept would be Cash Flow Quadrant. It's Rich Dad's Cash Flow Quadrant by Robert Kiyosaki. That's a really good one for this kind of theory. Basically, like what quadrant you're deriving your income from, and how do you create income in like, your employee salary or your business salary, and then convert that into wealth that where your money is eventually working for you.
And even though it sounds complicated, it's actually really easy. And, I follow the profit first system where you have your various different buckets and it's a separate bank
Yep.
account because so long as you can't see it, you can't spend it theoretically. But
Mhm.
it's really nice to look at that money and also to be able to plan your profit. And as much as I'm woo about, okay, universe, I am open and I'm available for money, it's not actually going to rain millions of dollars every single day. At some point, something will happen, or you have to also be able to manage your money. So it's the balance of the 5D and the 3D. And you need to understand and learn. And there's so many wonderful tools that are free on YouTube or just any money coaches online, where you do have to have that money management piece to be able to understand and make the decisions. And it's just about that research or learning how to do it or identifying an area that you're just really interested in learning more. And there's been so many of my own mentors who are putting the wealth in stock markets and real estate and diversifying everything. And there's nothing worse than looking at all these people on social media who are managing to do all the things that maybe I might just have one real estate property, but that's still the first step. Or if you are starting to engage in these other activities, or you are increasing your own capacity to take on more work or consulting work, it's just about taking that first step and learning. And I know, again, that social media makes us feel worse about ourselves and our situations. And it's not about that. It's just about taking the first steps and starting to make the decisions about what it is that you want in your life. And I'd previously mentioned Kate Scudder, and I was in her coaching program where I met Alexandra. She's a homesteader, 8-figure business owner living in Maine on a homestead, which is not what I want for my life. The thought of it, I mean, baby chickens near my house might be cute, or we have lots of rabbits in my neighborhood. So I actually have 2 rabbits. They're so cute living in my backyard. But that is the extent of my desire. Or when I hear women, and I've talked about this before, who are excited to homeschool. That is not me, you know? And so when we see examples of women or any other entrepreneurs creating this life, or just this life, even Alexandra, that you are creating, is that it really is about our own dreams and what it is that we desire. And stop looking at everybody else and look at what you actually desire, or learn more about how you can have the life that you want. Again, going back to my conversation with my financial partner, who said, what is it that you want right now? Is it that you want a longer term payoff, which would be about buying
Yep.
property in Vancouver, or if you want cash flow right now, investing in other parts of Canada where it's much cheaper and you can get a tenant in and you can
Yep.
actually make a stronger monthly income from a place in like New Brunswick or something. Whereas Vancouver, the cost of even just having an apartment and a tenant, you're barely actually going to break even, especially when you're in a building that might have been new 10 years ago, but now they're starting to be, the dishwasher breaks or things like that. The repairs start happening, is my point. And starting to look at opportunities to say, what do I need right now? Do I want cash right now? What does that look like? Am I looking for a longer term payoff? And so what I'm saying is that we do this in life, but we do it in business, because that is what leads to life fundamentally. Is these are your vehicles to be able to create that wealth.
Yeah, I think you absolutely hit the nail on the head. This is an incredible segue to a quote that I shared on my Instagram stories over the weekend. The quote was said by a really like incredible property investor here in Australia. He's a best-selling author. Steve McKnight is his name. And he says, very rarely is an asset going to generate income and growth. And it's exactly what you said. Like what's the strategy? Is it income or is it long-term growth? Are you trying to generate cash month by month, or are you holding for the long term? And so that's the exact same conversation that we asked ourselves when building our Amazon business. Like, are we trying to replace our income and live off of that through the business? Or are we saving up essentially for the big payday in not that long? Like, I'm only 33, so it's wild that I could be looking at a sum of money that would literally change my family's life forever. And to be able to know what to do with that and how to steward that and how to continue to let it grow is incredible. And I think it's so worth saying, not a lot of people understand why we're doing what we're doing. They're like, well, what do you mean you're not paying yourself from your business? And it's like, well, we're not saying the business isn't profitable. We're just saying we're not taking a salary.
Mhm.
It's completely different. It's a completely different conversation. And a lot of people don't understand why you wouldn't just pay yourself from something that's making money, because maybe they don't understand, like, your long-term goal of, well, this is actually my growth category. This is not an income, immediate cash generating
Yeah.
goal right now.
And I think a lot of entrepreneurs might look at all of the money in the bank account and say that's amazing, but they start spending it or getting the expensive car leases. I've been there. I've done that. It was great to drive my Audi. Unfortunately, when you have a kid, the little Audi Q3 does not fit the car seats and the stroller. So that ended up being a lifestyle change there. But it is nicer when you start to make decisions about, what am I going to spend on now and what am I going to wait on? And one of the best quotes that I ever heard is from a woman, Tanya Lee. She runs another coaching program. And she says, when I want to spend, I spend in my stock account. And
Yes,
she'll
exactly.
shop in the stock market, because she says, you know what? I do love to have wonderful clothes and shoes and things. But of course, she's also financially stable in the sense that she has a place to live. She has all the means of life. But she says, when I get the itch to buy something and I know I really don't need it, I just go into my brokerage account and buy stock. And I love it. Or
Love
she
that.
started saying her new mantra is land, not handbags. And it's
Mm-hmm.
not to say that girls are all about getting the nails and the hair done and buying the handbags. But the flip side of it is that if you are desiring to buy something new, and we all have it, it's human and it's natural. But what about starting to buy the assets? And that really sat with me, is about building the long-term wealth and starting to build
Yes.
generational wealth. It always blows my mind that it wasn't until 1984 or something that a woman couldn't have a business without a male co-signer. I was actually looking at some of the numbers the other day and it was mind blowing about it. mean, women couldn't get birth control for themselves without a man's signature until the 80s as well. And
Mm.
so if you are listening to this and you're stressing about being behind or feeling like you got to catch up or you want to, keep up with the Joneses, don't feel bad in listening to this. So much of what we are learning is now actually happening now because women weren't in the position to do that. And women didn't have a lot of abilities to get a credit card or a loan. So if you're feeling behind, it's actually really, really natural. And I know, especially women, when they look at something like the stock market, it's overwhelming. And what do I buy? How do I do this? But the stat is actually there that women are better investors on the stock market than men are. So trust your gut and also diversify. That's the biggest thing. Get some index funds. And then I love playing with tech stocks, but I've stopped playing with the fun ones because they weren't the smart ones. In my perspective, again, this is not financial advice, but when I started to balance between more responsible, if you will, stocks, as well as having some fun, and I could actually play around with that, it started to become even more exciting to me. And I just started to play and to learn. And that's so much about what Rich Dad, Poor Dad is about, is that developing those assets and starting to learn actually about what millionaires do in order to create and then have that wealth. And I think you have taken such a measured, but not overly disciplined approach to it. You have this beautiful flow to your life and how you're approaching it. And I think that's just amazing. And I wish more people could just see that.
Oh, thank you.
When you talk about reinvesting back in the business, what exactly are you referring to?
I'm talking about every dollar of profit that we make goes into buying more inventory to launch more products, which are essentially the assets that generate the income for our business.
Amazing. And what about, or what would you say to things like investing in advertising? Or I know you had talked about, you guys figured out the keywords for Amazon on your own, because I think you had an agency before. So how do you feel about the quote unquote large expenses as you do that, especially when you are trying to grow a seven-figure business? Because I guess ultimately it would be, well, I can just sell more product and keep doing that. But you're taking a very measured approach to how you invest in and to sell this business because ultimately you want a payday. So what is that strategy and that planning and that process? Because ultimately, what do you know a buyer is looking for when you do that sale? And clearly that's why you do more investments. But what is that thought in terms of the selling and the buying? What is it that you want to build into the business? And what is it that will, aside from the products as assets, like what else makes you sexy for a buyer? I guess is the short question to that long question, if you will.
Yeah. The Amazon world is really simple, and this is my area of expertise. So I couldn't tell you like if you had a real estate portfolio, like what would be like what you need to do to kind of improve that to make it more attractive, right? So this is going to be really specific to Amazon FBA, fulfilled by Amazon businesses. It's seller discretionary earnings, and it's very simple math, and that's essentially if anyone is familiar with the term EBITDA, roughly, kind of, sorta. So it's basically like your profit, and then it's a multiple of what the profit of your business is, and that's like a mass
I know.
oversimplification. So yeah, so it's profit plus add backs, where add backs would be anything that the new buyer doesn't have to, that you're paying for currently, but the new buyer won't take on that expense. So seller discretionary earnings is like profit plus add backs. Roughly, again, gross oversimplification. We don't need to get more detailed than that for this conversation. But what do I do to make my business more sexy to a potential buyer? I need to have growth on growth. So I'm continuing to grow. And I need to have a strong suite of physical products that have strong reviews, good supplier communication, and everything that comes with that. But the biggest thing is that seller discretionary earnings. And so like you would add back, if we were paying ourselves a salary, that doesn't count against our net profit. Like you would add your salary back in. But then, so it's like, okay, the salary doesn't take away from the SDE of the business or its valuation, but what it does take away from is growth. And so this is where, like, when we realized, well, we could pay ourselves a salary from the business, and then that money is dead because it doesn't continue to generate more money. It just goes to food, it goes to living expenses. Like that's not generating more money. What does generate more money is launching more products that sell on Amazon. So my cash generated from the business keeps going. It's the same thing, rich dad, poor dad, buy the asset, buy the asset, buy the asset.
And you hit such an important point because there also comes a point when you're trying to balance growth with do I or do I not invest more and put it back, or do I take more money? And I find that one is such a fine line, right?
Yeah.
Because especially I know that in my business, which was a service business, you can only do so much when you're either working your team like crazy or having to invest in another salary. And you want to be able to have cash in the bank, but you will literally burn out your team and having them quit. So there's stuck between such a rock and a hard place when it comes to this one, particularly for a person or employee reliant business like mine was, where you get to have so much more flexibility on determining is, do I add a product? It's not a head count or necessarily as expensive as a head count. So it's awesome that you can see businesses like this where you can, not that I'm saying it's simple, but you can also almost make a simpler decision than I could, because you get to have almost more control on your money from my perspective. Whereas with mine, it was how much of a salary can we do? What kind of person do we need? Trying to find a person. Like it ends up being murkier,
Yeah.
if you will,
Mhm.
in terms of finding a right body where you can physically create a product. And so it's really cool to see that there's so many options out there. But again, I talk so much, I tend to overtalk. But my point is that every business is different and it's
Yeah.
not cookie cutter. And everybody is going to have to look at some point in their business, whether choosing to reinvest or to hold the profit or to decide to grow. Everybody is different, but it really depends on what your wealth creation goals and your desires are. And also about just having a pause when you are starting to look at these investment decisions or wealth decisions and saying, do I really actually want to invest in this? And I think sometimes entrepreneurs have shiny spoon syndrome, like, let's do this. This will be amazing. This will be super fun. And then you actually get to take a step back to your goal and say, is this in line with my goal and my desires? And it's really about the long term versus short term. It's like instant gratification versus, do I want the mansion? That's kind of how I look at it.
Yeah, 100%. Wealth is all about delayed gratification. And I will die on this hill saying that because you've just got to make decisions that are less desirable in the short term. And it's certainly the exact opposite of keeping up with the Joneses and having every new and shiny thing that, like, let's be real, we all want that shit.
Oh,
We all do. We all do. But, like what's sexier, having it now or having it later, like a few years down the track when you've got assets when you can cash flow into it.
yes.
Um, yeah, and so I think too, it's also worth addressing risk because risk is relative. So to me, investing in the stock market, really kind of on any level, is more risk than investing into my Amazon business because I'm an expert in the Amazon business model. I know what I'm doing. I know how to make stuff grow on Amazon. To someone whereas like the stock market, I'm pretty green. Like I'm only just learning. Like, will that come later? 100% absolutely. Do I understand the baseline of like compound interest and my money is better off in an investment account that's generating 10, 15% return per year than sitting in the bank? Absolutely. Am I doing that? Yes. But am I going to go and like pick stocks? Hell no, because I don't know anything about it. For someone who's listening, who's like, gosh, I don't really know where to start, like what asset class, like it's all so um like daunting. We all start there. Just pick something that feels intriguing and interesting to you, and don't be afraid to get in, get your hands dirty, and learn. Ask questions. Don't be afraid of asking dumb questions. I've asked the dumbest questions you could possibly ever imagine. That's how you build knowledge. And I think too, like you said, like that shiny object syndrome, what you focus on grows. And it's gotta, like, you've got to give it like years. We're talking years, many, 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 many years to become the expert and continue to grow it. Like, just because it's not working for you in 6 months doesn't mean that it's a dead idea. It just means you need to go deeper.
Yes. And start with a little bit of money and also not to be blaming ourselves. Because I think there's also, again, social media just shows people who made 1 million in Bitcoin or whatever it might be. And,
Yeah.
but just start a little bit and start to get your feet wet and educate yourself. And this is so much also in business. Not every entrepreneur or every entrepreneur coach has all of the answers, but we can certainly be guided to it and to be listening to our own intuition about what feels good. If something feels good and you can listen to your body and listen to your own heart, start taking those steps. And it doesn't mean that you need to. And I think this is something that I've learned is that I'm typically like so gung ho, I'm just going to do it. And then I figure it out later. But then I look at how much time it took me to get there. And I'm just like, I think I'm just going to start slower and start to
Mhm.
ease into things. One, because my nervous system prepares that. But it's just, I want to take my time to learn and to ask the questions. Whereas before, I would just ask the questions later and sometimes have to figure out my messes. And as you slow down, there's nothing wrong with making 7 figures next year as opposed to in the next 90 days. Because if you try and do it in the next 90 days, there's going to be stuff to clean up. And frankly, I'm tired of cleaning things up. So it's okay to be slower and more methodical about things. And again, I think that we're taught that entrepreneurs take the bull by the horns and do this, but when you actually do it methodically, strategically, and actually from the right goals, just as you've proven, like what is your goal? What's it you're trying to do? You actually get stronger success. You can actually hold that because you're building something step by step as opposed to building the bridge and then having to do the foundation, but the bridge is falling, right? And I think that's
Yep.
been one of my biggest lessons in entrepreneurship. And partially because I actually fell into entrepreneurship without knowing nothing about it. And then I just did it. But now, and maybe it's my age, but I feel like,
No, that's every entrepreneur. I
no,
think
we
that's
learn.
so, yeah, no, I think that's like more people need to openly say that. Like, no one gets it right the first time. We all stumble through
Yes.
it.
And it is about stumbling through it. And I think that was also part of so much that I learned on our coaching calls is that everybody's still stumbling through, but just ask questions of a coach or somebody who's already done it, you know? And because they will have some more answers. So don't hesitate to ask the questions. I think there's also this, oh, this person's so successful. They've done 7 figures. I feel really bad or really weird by asking this question. Ask the question because they are more than happy to share if not the right answer, they will share their experience of what might not have worked and what they've learned. And that is the goal about learning about what they have learned because it will help you. It will save you money for sure. But it's also about being able to have that discussion and just all the crazy that's in your head. You're actually going to get so much clarification. And even if ourselves, if I actually just sit down and like write a question or figure it out, oh, all of a sudden I've come to an amazing answer and it's pretty awesome.
Yeah. Gosh, I mean, I think about some of the things that we've learned in like a really hardcore way over our journey, because growth is messy.
Yeah.
And I think that is a conversation I am so passionate about being open about because in our business, so like we went from 0 to 100K. Then the next year we did in 1 year. Then the next year we did 750,000. Then we did 1.2 million. Then shit started to break because we did not have the structures in place and we didn't have the right team that like could grow. And when I say team, I mean like accountants, tax, legal, like all that. Especially navigating tax in Australia and the US because our business is US based. So it was just like it was messy. Like that year after we did our first million US in revenue, what 2023 was messy because we were like, wow, we do not have the right people in place. And like luckily, I would much rather have that problem than I have a traffic or demand
Yep.
problem. Like entrepreneurship is all about like solving problems creatively, right? Like these are the problems I want to solve. And my husband and I were on a call with our accounting team actually this morning. It's just something is happening right now and it just feels really messy. And because we just had to restructure a couple things with the sale of our business in mind, we just looked at each other and we were like, this is a problem that we are happy to solve because that's what entrepreneurship is. But yeah, I think like, why am I sharing all of this? Because if you can have the right tax, legal, and accounting teams in place, like from the get-go, that's everything.
Mhm.
Absolutely everything. And we totally fumbled our way through that for the first like 3 years of our business because we grew so fast and we just were like, oh, focusing on growing the business. But then you also have to focus on like the actual, like you said earlier, 3D like structural stuff you've got to focus on.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And I love how you talk about the messiness because I think that there is this imagination, imaginary unicorn, whatever it might be, that it is so easy to be an entrepreneur. Social media does make it look so easy, and nobody's talking about the messy middle of it. And that's actually what it's meant to be. It is meant to be messy. It is life, it is business. Nobody knows all the answers. And also, for anybody listening, please do not let this episode stress you out. You are not going to have the perfect accountant at the very beginning. As you
Yes.
grow, you will change your teams, things will change, and your business is meant to break. Your business will especially break as you're trying to get to 1 million because the systems and processes that you have not been scaled. And this is not to make you feel bad. It's just an honest truth and to say everybody's gone through this. This is super normal. Everything is going to break. And then you get to 1 million and it's going to break again. And then when you get to 5 million, it's going to break, and usually in between it. And then it's actually not hard to get from 1 to 5 million necessarily. I mean, obviously everybody has a different story, but you're 5 and onwards, that's even bigger breaking. And I think that there is this myth out there that when you get to 5 million, you're kicking back, but you're actually dealing with bigger problems. It continues to get bigger. So it's the same problem, but it's bigger. And so this myth that entrepreneurship is easy is a bunch of bullshit. And it still gets to be fun. It really does still get to be fun. So again, this is not to scare anybody out of this, but just take the pressure off. It's not meant to be easy. You're still trying to figure out how to do it, and everybody's story is going to be so different. But going back to the lessons, I would love to talk about all of the messy and the hard that you guys have had in the past couple of years that you were talking about at the beginning. I would love it if you can share more about that.
I guess it's like summed pretty perfectly in what you were just saying, like shit's gonna break when you get to 1 million.
Yeah.
And because the structures that were in place that got you to 1 million are not going to get you to multiple millions or 5 million, right? Like stuff's got to crumble in order to come back together. We as people like needed to deepen in our ability to hold more. Like I was being too nice and not in a like you can be kind in
Mm,
every interaction that you have, but I was being nice.
mm,
Like so there's a difference. Like I was too afraid to rock the boat. I was too afraid to let teams go who I knew were not right for our business anymore. I was too afraid to have the conversation and be like, "Hey, you missed this as
mm,
our bookkeeper in our P&L. Like you shouldn't have done that. What's going on?" As a person, I really needed to deepen and become stronger. And, like they say, hire slow, fire fast. Like that was probably the theme of all of the stuff that started to break. And the interesting thing, and you touched on this not long ago, is like my intuition knew, but I didn't
mm.
listen.
Yeah.
My intuition was like whispering to me, Alex, this team's got to go. Yeah, like, right. And it was across a lot of different branches of our business, accounting, bookkeeping, advertising, like lots of different areas that were all very big and have a huge impact to the lifeblood of our business. And so, like, when I look back on it, these last 2 years have been my favorite as a business owner because I know that there is nothing that I can't handle for what I know our business to be right now. Like I can literally handle anything. And I'm not afraid to have those conversations with kindness anymore. I'm just not because I know it's right for our business and not only right for our business, but like the bigger picture is it's right for the long-term vision of my children.
Mhm.
And that's the thing that's like, nope, that takes priority over everything.
Yes. Yes. Oh my gosh. I love how you also address that so much of the growth happens through the inner work. And I've
Yep.
often heard it said that what got you from 1 to 500,000 is not who you will be to get you from 500,000 to 1 million. And it's true because it is so much of the outer work. But unless you're managing the money and the business, you cannot get to a profitable seven
Mm,
figures. And we talk so much about revenue. And I remember when I was a part of EO Entrepreneurs Organization, a global membership of entrepreneurs, and you need to have a minimum $1 million US business. Well, I was finding out that there was plenty of seven-figure business owners in revenue, but then
Mhm.
start to uncover the debt behind it. And which is fine. Debt's not a bad thing. But I think I had this rose-colored glasses about what seven figures was. And so starting to have the conversations about what the money in the bank account looks like or what the expenses are like. And is it just an expense or is it a reinvestment? And starting to ask those questions. But again, is that it's amazing to have those dreams and it's amazing to do personal development, but unless you can actually manage the back end of the business to have profit in there, then those are the crucial questions to be asking. Because if you don't have anything to show for it, or some money or some profit in the bank, your business is not saleable. You're always going to be strapped to it. And you couldn't even shut it down because you might have debt. So it ends up being that you're actually working for your business, which was not the whole point of entrepreneurship in the first place. So starting to ask those questions, starting to evaluate. And again, it's really, really easy, especially if you worked with a coach who's done it. I know it sounds scary, but starting to make those harder decisions that feel hard at the time, but are the best for the long term and best for your children as well, right? That is ultimately what we are here for is freedom and love and joy and spending time with people. And if you're not getting that, that's when the evaluation really needs to start to happen as well.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Like exactly like you said, top line revenue on a P&L is one thing. What the heck does the balance sheet look like? Totally different story. And so like with that, if you're like, oh my God, what do those words even mean? Again, don't forget, like as women, we are very much like we have less history and time in this conversation on our sides. And so when you look at like, okay, it's really only been 40 some years that we've been in this game right alongside men, like look at how exponential that growth has been
Mhm.
in such a short period of time. Like we are, and it's not a competition, and I'm
Yep.
not trying to like intentionally compare, but for the sake of like giving yourself grace, women have come so far in such a short period of time. So that to me is incredible. But don't freak out if you're kind of like, oh, I feel so behind. Just start somewhere. And I think also it's really comforting and empowering to remember that when you compare the investment portfolio of a woman to a man, complete apples to apples, women outperform men 90% of the time. Like that is a study that has been done and replicated over decades. And so I think it just really speaks to the, masculine and feminine energy in income generation and wealth, and not just women biologically, but feminine energy, which is present in everyone. Feminine energy is wealth. And when you couple that with masculine energy, it's unstoppable. But the key is to not be afraid to get in the arena and just learn. And not be afraid to like let it feel clunky and messy at first.
Yes. And like asking the questions of your financial advisors, or one of the secrets when you have your stock portfolio is to rebalance it, which is something that I've learned. And I don't do it myself. I have somebody who helps me with it, but not just letting your money sit there, ask questions. You are not stupid for asking questions. And in fact, women often ask better questions than men. So own your power. And I love this from Sarah Jenks. And I've said this before, women were actually the world's first financiers. And the priestesses actually held everybody's money, and they were the first banks and advisors to kings and merchants. And so it's actually our birthright, and we are really good with money. And I think that's something that has been taken from us as women's roles changed, or, we can talk about patriarchy and all of that stuff. But
Yeah.
the point is that we're coming home. And
Yes.
this is actually, it is where our intuition and all of, again, going back to the sacred feminine, which is also in men, just like you said, but starting to listen to that. One thing I heard the other day is that the sacred masculine is also rising. And it's not to say just men, but it
Wow.
means a different way of doing things. And men are healing anyways through the divine feminine, but the sacred masculine is coming up. And I think it's going to be really interesting to watch this and to see more and more women step into a very beautiful power. We were taught about power. Well, at least I'm a child of the 80s. So we had models of shoulder pads and being a bitch in
Yeah.
the office, frankly. And I think that we're going to see an even more amazing evolution of women, but just taking those actions and starting to ask those questions as you do the masculine, that blend is now rising. There was so much about the feminine, but I think the blend is starting to rise. And I think we're going to see more and more women and men being even more successful. Like it's in the air and we're going to start seeing it. And it's going to be really exciting to see what comes out of it.
Yeah, I love that so much. Yeah, look, the sacred masculine is like, while you were speaking just then, I just had chills of, everything coming together, between divine and sacred feminine, divine and sacred masculine. And that is the key. That is so the key to building wealth. It's because with wealth, you've got to have the cash, you've got to have the capital to build it, right? To grow. And so to generate that cash, to generate that capital is a masculine energy task. And then to grow it, that's a feminine energy
Yes.
activity.
Oh my gosh. Unless you had anything else to add, I wanted to end on allowing and the feminine energy of allowing, because we've talked so much about how you do, but what
Yeah.
about the allowing and the surrendering? Because that to me is the hardest piece. And it's okay, I didn't think I was a control freak, but I'm obviously and clearly I'm a control freak. But how do you even do that? And how do you allow and how do you trust that it's going to come in? And I recently learned that trust is actually a healthy masculine. We're actually, as humanity, as women, we've been operating in wounded masculine without that level of trust and things like that. So, how do you trust? How do you allow, especially in a world that has taught us to do?
Yeah, especially when there's so much evidence, even just out there today, of not trusting and wanting to contract and maybe not feeling safe, right? Because in order to allow, you have to, on some level, feel safe to allow.
It is. And the nervous system that if I don't do this, it's never going to happen, or it's not going to happen the way that I want. And actually, I found just relaxing and saying whatever happens, happens brings it in. But you have to be able to trust and to trust yourself. Maybe it really is just about trusting ourselves that the path that we have set is amazing and it will be this or something better, as opposed to, oh my God, if I don't control it, it's just going to crash. It's actually this or something better.
Yeah, and I think you're so right. And just remembering that there's a difference between easy and easeful. Like,
Mm-hmm.
while entrepreneurship might not be easy, like, can the deepenings and the challenges still be easeful? And that's a choice. Um, I really, to allow, wow, that's a really incredible question. I think I would answer this so differently 2 years ago, 3 years ago to now. So I'll give you both answers. How do I allow, how do I trust as my present day self? I actually have like an evidence list. It's a physical, like handwritten evidence list of like, when I did this, this happened. This unexpected thing happened as a result of this. Like, and so whenever I'm in a space of like not feeling like I can surrender or distrust, I physically will look at that list and be like, cool, I have some solid evidence built up,
Yeah.
because then my brain like can't ignore that. How would I answer this question when I'm just starting out? I really looked to bank evidence of people who had gone before me, that thing, what I desired was possible. And I can remember so clearly who those people were. And they were just people who I followed in the online space, who would literally never know who the heck I was. But because they were sharing about what they were creating, I would bank that as evidence. Or like, someone I really love is Sarah Blakely. She just does that 5D, 3D balance so beautifully. And yeah, just surrounding myself with all of this evidence that what I desired was possible before I had built the evidence myself. And now it's like, okay, surrounding myself with evidence of like who's 5 steps, 10 steps, 20 steps ahead of where we desire to be, and pulling that as into my field as evidence too.
Yes. And it's so true. Those are expanders and showing that it's possible because our brain needs to know. Otherwise, our brains make us crazy. I've discovered that
Yeah.
one. Very like there's sometimes I've started to be the gentle observer of my thoughts. And I'm like, wow, what is going on in there? And just starting to have that solid belief in those expanders or love how you have the evidence jar. I think that's amazing when our brains can see that, but it also reminds ourselves we are, unity conscious. We are all the same, actually. There is no division. It's there for all of us. And it's actually when you have that evidence, it's showing what's possible for us as well. And the universe wants that as well, which is amazing. So calling it my mansion, my sports car, and a vacation in the Caribbean tomorrow. I'm down for that.
Yeah,
Love
but
it.
you're actually calling in the assets to generate the cash flow to cash flow into all of that. I know you
Yes,
are.
I know. And there's something that is so, not to say that I'm hyper independent, but there's something that just makes me feel so good to know that I did it. And it's not to say that I'm not grateful for all the support that I've had for parents and for family or for partners at the time. But there's something so delicious of being able to look at that evidence that I did it myself. It just feels cool because when you do get there, it's that magic. And it's not to say that it's without its challenges, but when going back to the easeful, when you get there and say, wow, that was actually really easy. When I got out of my own way, when I stopped worrying about it, even though I know worrying is normal, when you get there, that's just a feeling that's undescribable.
Yeah, yeah. It just like it makes that reward so much more worth it and so much more rich and deep for sure.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much for your time. I'm so appreciative. Do you have anything else that you want to share?
Gosh, I think just don't be afraid to ask the questions. And the key to building wealth genuinely is financial literacy. And so understand that it might feel messy, it might feel clunky at the start, but like we can't bypass that
Yes.
step if we desire to build, wealth that's going to set us free.
Yes. Yes. Oh my gosh, that was a big one. And especially, I didn't have a lot of financial literacy, but I just started asking the questions of my bookkeeper and started building it. And it's not
Yep.
easy to read the P&L or the balance sheet or understand it, but just ask questions and you've got the support. I think that's another big one. You have a team. When you build a team, you have a team to answer the questions. That's what they're there for. So just take advantage of that and start educating yourself.
And I'm going to sneak one more in because
Yes.
you just inspired me by what you said just then. P&L and balance sheet seem really daunting and how to understand them, how to strategize around them, how to know like what the heck everything means, but it's genuinely just third grade math with fancy words. That's it.
It is. It really is.
Yeah.
Although
No derivatives, no calculus, nothing.
I feel like I failed third grade math, but actually it's very easy to learn these. And again, I think it's just so daunting. But my
Yeah.
bookkeeper would actually just pull out numbers from the P&Ls or the balance sheets and literally send me numbers and bullet points about the stuff that I needed to know. You
Yeah.
can ask that information of your bookkeeper and they work for you ultimately. So take advantage of them and know that you're never alone.
Yeah. Love that so much.
Thank you so, so much. And I'm so excited for everybody listening to this episode. We're going to put Alexandra's details in the show notes, and I'll also put links to the books. And as always, drop a DM on Instagram if you have any questions, and we'll talk to you again soon. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Powerful Podcast. I've so enjoyed sharing all of my insights, all my mistakes, all of my learnings as I grew and scaled my business from 6 to 7 figures. If you enjoyed this, please leave us a review. And then I'll send you back my top 3 ways to make $10,000. And I tell you, they're super easy, super creative, and super easy for you to implement. So please drop us the review, send it over, and we will send you back with my top 3 ways to make $10,000.